Okay. Welcome, all you wiretappers out there here in the Gangland Wire Studio. And I have our good friend, co-host, mob historian, Camulus Robinson. Cam Robinson. Good to have you here, Cam.
Gary, how you doing? Glad to be here.
All right. So you've done a bunch of research. You know, Cam's been helping me out a lot because I was so busy with that mob film festival and finishing off my Brothers Against Brothers, the Savella Spiro War in DVD or movie. And he's done a lot of research and really got me through that. And he's done a lot of research on the Utica, New York mob collapse, 1970, 1992, which be upstate New York. And I would assume that they were connected to the Magadino family out of Buffalo. Would that be correct?
Right. They also call it the Arm. They were a crew of the Arm up there, the Magadino family.
Okay, so they didn't really have they were be considered a crew. They didn't really have their own little family that then kind of paid homage to Magadino, but they were more like a crew.
Right. Valachi actually said that he identified them as a separate family in Utica and Rome, but really they were, he said Salvatore and Joseph Falcone, but really it was sort of a separate area, but really they did fall under Magadino. So they would be just a really large insular crew, but they still did kick up to Magadino at the end of the day.
Okay, interesting. I not really heard of them myself. I'm trying to get my mind right here. Go ahead. Yeah, I'll cut this out. Go ahead. Kind of get started on this escalating tensions here.
Yeah. Well, you've got these two brothers, Salvatore and Joseph Falcone. They ran things from Prohibition forward. The older brother, Salvatore Falcone, was really the head guy, and he lived in between Miami and Utica. He died in 1972. He was 81 years old. So once he dies, his weaker brother sort of takes over, Joseph Falcone. He doesn't have the moxie that his brother had. And so then in 1974, Steve Magadino dies in Buffalo. So in 72 and 74, you've got this major brain drain in the New York and the upstate New York families. And so this Joseph Falcone is left sort of weak and aging without the strength of his brother or Magadino backing him up. And he's got all these sort of young Turks, maybe not too young, but guys in their 50s and 60s, while he's in his 70s, are coming up. They want to seize power. They think he's doing things the old way, and they're looking at new ways to make money, new ways of drugs, and they're willing to be a bit more violent. And so you get his top guys starting to be disrespectful, and they don't show up to meetings. He even got robbed by one of his top guys. They stole $54,000 from a safe of his. A guy, his capo named Tony Falange robbed this Joseph Falcone, who was the boss.
Oh my God, that takes a lot of balls there.
Yeah.
That's
it was returned later, but they just I guess they were just sort of pushing the boundaries there, So.
Interesting. I also see that somebody from the Colombo family, from Carmine Persico, was starting to move in on the area. Saw this power vacuum. As that's how they are. They see a power vacuum.
That's right.
These older bosses are gone, and they start making their moves on that.
Yeah, and I heard mixed things about, was Colombo forcing their way in. I don't know that it got as heated as that. And some people, I've seen some people online say it was, and I saw an interview with a guy. But basically, it just sounds like once this older Falcone left, and these two Falcones got older and out of the power structure, their own guys wanted to take over. But like you said, you've got that power vacuum, so you got somebody else wants to expand into their territory. I don't think that necessarily constituted a war per se, but I think that you did have some butting heads.
Now, what's the deal with this Albert Marone guy? He called him a young Turk, and he comes out. I remember we had a guy that like this was really violent, and he came out of jail and he started doing all kinds of stuff, and he was so stupid it wasn't long before he ended up back in jail. But
Marone had killed two of his own guys earlier. I had it on here, but I think I've taken it off. But these were two guys who were associated with Marone that he had killed earlier. He'd blown one up in a car and shot one at point blank range. So he had been in jail for a couple of years. And then Marone comes out talking about, I'm going to take things over. You've got old man Falcone is out of it, and Marone works for this Tony Falange, but Marone was literally going around, he's going to kill somebody, threatening violence on everybody, and he's going to take over the family. He was really vocal about it, and the guy was in his, I want to say he was in his early to mid 30s, and he was just making a lot of noise. So
what's really interesting is at the same time in the 70s, we had the Spiros, a guy who was just like this. He came out of the penitentiary and started recruiting other guys, and we're going to take over. You had the Danny Green fight with the hierarchy in Cleveland about that same time. It seems like these were like the baby boomers were getting had been around long enough that they wanted more and more and wanted to push the old World War I kind of people. People were born around turn of the century, not in the 1910, 1915, wanted to push them out and take it over, and they weren't stepping aside. So it's just an interesting parallels there.
You see in Chicago, an entire generation of guys born between 38 and 42 are all killed throughout the 70s. They're just, for one reason or another, for this, they just wipe them all out as soon as they start getting a little bit too big for their britches. So I guess that, what you're saying is right. You've got the older guys starting to get a little paranoid about these younger guys getting some power.
So what happened in Utica then with our friend Albert Marone? I think he is not long for this earth.
He was out of prison for almost 3 weeks. He was out. He was out with Louis Brindisi, who was the local mob attorney up there. But Brindisi was pretty much connected to everybody, as we'll discuss. Brindisi represented every mob figure at all times in Utica, so he was really tied in. So Marone and his girlfriend are sitting at dinner with Brindisi. Brindisi gets up, he excuses himself. Marone starts getting nervous. He's wondering where Brindisi went. Then Louis Brindisi and his wife get up and they excuse themselves. So later on, Marone goes back to his apartment. He's walking back. Somebody jumps up and says, hey, Albert. And he shields his girlfriend and these two guys. He's blown away right there, walking his girlfriend to her home. These two guys, Danny Nappi and Jake Minicone were two of the shooters. They've been identified as being with the Colombo family, and Marone is known to have butted heads with some of the new Colombo guys up there. I think he was telling him he wanted them out of his territory and this, that, and the other. And he was also butting heads with the Falcone people, his own organization, but some of the scuttlebutt seems to be that the Colombos moved preemptively and shot Marone, and that kind of the Falcone and now running by this guy Tony Falange, they saw that as a sign of disrespect. The Colombos just stepping in rather than having a sit down or anything. Even if the Falange and Falcone organization were mad at this guy, it's disrespectful to just come in and kill him without permission. Yeah. So I think that really started to drive a wedge.
Yeah, they could have had plans for him. They just needed to, bring him in and get him under control, and he could have helped them make money.
And I think from what I read, he was an earner. So
yeah, but the Colombos keep moving north and keep trying to move in. They want to expand their territory up to that, take it away from the Buffalo family, from the Magadino family.
And then you've got a couple months later. This is just, you can see where like you said, when you get any sort of vacuum, you got this guy Albert Schiano. Now I couldn't find any of his affiliations, if he was Colombo or if he was whatever, but I think that he was connected, is what I did read. He was found dead in the road in Syracuse with 6 bullets in his head. So I don't, I would say he was probably connected with something unless it was mistaken identity, but the guy who was suspected is a guy named Vincent Calogero, and it was supposed to be over gambling debts. And, you've got somebody shot in the head 6 times and left in the middle of the road. 2 months after this, Marone is shot to death in a parking lot. Yeah. So you've got really, that's just a lot of public murders in a real short period of time. And periodically, you've got that going on in Utica. When there's violence in Utica, they're very violent.
Yeah, and whenever you get two or three of those in a row, that's there's something more going on. This isn't just some gambling debt or or somebody's,
Yeah.
mad at somebody for some reason. There's something going on.
Yeah.
And usually it's somebody's trying to take over territory and establish some kind of control. At least in my experience, it always was.
Yeah, and Schiano ran a produce market. The Colombos were moving into the produce market and extortion, so that might have had something to do with it. But like you said, there was something going on unseemly in Utica.
So I see you've come up with another guy, Dominic Bretti, who was a Colombo family member, a capo under Colombo and Carmine Persico, and he ends up going up there. It's kind of interesting. I see that he claimed to have been a born-again Christian in prison and started a charity organization to help reform criminals and give them employment at a seafood company, which, of course, gives him a steady supply of new recruits.
That's right. He a lot of the guys who I can't remember the name of his, but yeah, he comes out. He said, "I'm a born-again Christian." I guess he was initially from Utica, and he was in prison down in Florida. He comes out with this born-again Christian thing. Of course, by this time, he's done his time, and he kept his mouth closed. I think he did 15 years or something for the Colombos. And he comes back, and he also wants to take over Utica. So he starts moving in. He recruits a bunch of guys with his charity. You come to me, I'll give you a job, and I'll give you a job. So he recruits a lot of guys pretty quickly. He puts together a pretty decent sized crew. These two of these guys who killed Marone immediately sign up with him, and he signs on a woman named Dawn Grillo, who is the wife of another Colombo associate who was in prison, a guy named Angelo Grillo. But so Dawn is working with them in robberies and extortions and check cashing schemes. I mean, they do a lot of, and basically anything they can do to make money as they're starting to get established there.
So under the cover of this organization he's got going, he has his own crew. He can give them jobs there, and they have some kind of a place that they're saying they're going to work, and gives them a certain amount of cover. But he's got his own crew running that.
And he's starting to reach out to political organizations. I guess he gets into it with the local Democratic boss, who he was trying to get some help with his charity organization. He actually was going to put a hit out on the guy. I mean, so Bretti's reaching into the politics of the place. He's using, like you said, he's using his charity to put together a crew and to try and reach into the politics. So he's trying to take over Utica the old-fashioned way, with politics and with muscle. He just was a little bit clumsy about how he did it.
Yeah, that's this guy was sharp, though. I mean, he might have been clumsy, but he was sharp. He was coming at it from all angles, and that whole charity thing. And you can get in with politicians. They like to have their pictures taken where they're some kind of fight against recidivism and helping people come out of the jail become productive citizens again. So that's great cover, man. That's interesting. Yeah. I've seen one of those here in Kansas City. I used to wonder about it, but I never. Nothing ever really came of it, but everybody that came out of the penitentiary went to work for this guy, and he had done a bit for our robbery himself, but he was kind of a cut above most of the other people around. Now, they weren't mob connected. They were more probably narcotics organizations in the city connected. But everybody came through his place at one time, and I remember thinking this was quite a recruiting ground for him. We could find out, a little bit about each guy as they came back out of the penitentiary, and
that's right.
And then put them into crews and get them going. So I don't know if it happened or not, but that was pretty slick on this dude's part.
Yeah, he really it was pretty sharp. There was another guy later on who tried to put together a similar. I guess it's kind of like what Colombo did, putting together the Italian American. Thoughts trailed off, but the Italian American Civil Rights League. It was trying to do a charity as Joe Gallo did the same thing to a lesser extent as a kind of a fuck you to Joe Colombo. But so I think that they were seeing this as a kind of as a way to sort of diversify these charities and civil rights and all kinds of things.
Yeah, it's smart. The only thing they did like that here in Kansas City is they created a charity so they could host a bingo game and then skim money off the bingo game. No, you wouldn't even know they had the charity except you went in and looked at the papers on the bingo game that were filed with the state to get the state license. But there's a lot of money passing through one of those bingo games, one of those bingo halls. I mean, a lot of money. You ever walk into a bingo hall?
Yeah, with the
Back in the
15.
day?
Yeah, it's stacked up. My sister plays bingo. You go in there and there's, it's piled high and people have 15 cards in front of them. Hell,
there's a lot of money passed through one of those things.
A lot of smoke in a bingo party.
Oh my God! Oh my God! I couldn't even hardly breathe, man. You probably can't smoke in them now, but back then, oh my God, you couldn't hardly see across the room, and if you weren't a smoker, you couldn't hardly breathe. I'm glad you mentioned that. I'd forgotten about that.
Hell of a lot of smoke.
Oh well, we digress. So go ahead. Let's see. Where are we? We are this Dominic Breddy. He's got his crew. He's out doing things, and
he's getting his extortion business is growing. Now the Falange and the Falcone, they're a bit more traditional. They've got the gambling, they've got loan shark, and they've got some gun running up and through New York and New Jersey. That's the Falcone. What's led to the Falcone organization that was already established. But Breddy comes in and he's trying to do extortion, and he's trying to set up he's muscling on these businesses and trying to get into the politics. He's moving very quickly, and that's drawing a bit more attention to him. He's becoming a bit more visible, and he's creating these hit lists. This Democratic boss, and there was a bar owner. He blew up his bar and wanted to kill the guy. So Breddy has an informant in his crew, a guy named Anthony Mastracco. I can't speak. And so the whole time that Breddy's building his power, this Mastracco is informing on him. Well, then in December, I guess Breddy got out in November, shortly thereafter, or in around June, shortly thereafter. This Dawn Grillo, this woman, she was strangled and beaten to death and left down in a ravine. Apparently, they thought she might be speaking to the FBI, but they also believed she might have skimmed $4,000. And so she was killed and left in a pretty public way. They found her in the ravine right off the road, and her husband was in prison at the time. He was part of the crew. He was just in prison, so he was aware that they had killed his wife.
Yeah, I would say that she was stealing money from the company,
Yeah.
not informing the FBI. They're informing the FBI. They usually find out some better way to dispose of them, but because you don't want to do an FU to the FBI. Hey, we killed your informant, but I bet she was stealing from them. And then you leave the body out there for a message to others and say, she was stealing. This is what happens when you steal. That's so Breddy is in jail. And he gets back out, I see, and he's got this hit list of people. He's much more violent and out there than the Marone crew. So that's the
Falcone crew. Yeah, so he's escalating. He comes up with this hit list. He's got his charity, but he's moved on, and he really wants to take over. He bombs a guy's bar. This lawyer Brindisi, who was the lawyer of this Marone. Breddy, he's too many damn vowels, man. This lawyer Brindisi, Louis Brindisi, is also this guy Breddy's lawyer. But Dominic Breddy, wants to make sure he's loyal, so he orders his guys to beat the lawyer up. But then he calls it off. He decides probably discretion is the better part of valor, and decides not to beat up his own lawyer at the last minute. But that's the kind of logic that was occurring to this guy. And so he's killed a woman in his crew. He's blown up a bar owner. He had hit out on the local Democratic boss. He was going to beat up his own attorney. And the whole time he's got an informant in his crew, Mastracco. And so then they were busted. The crew, Breddy, Nappy, his whole crew was caught for the murder of Dawn Grillo, and for this bar owner for blowing up his bar and putting out a hit on him. So Breddy was arrested in June of 1980. So he was out of prison for about 11 months. Huh. So he really made his mark, but he didn't have much time to do it. So while he's in prison, this is where it gets kind of interesting.
Yeah, he's gone for a long time, I would imagine.
Yeah, he went away for I think 19 years.
Okay.
But
so
this Brindisi was his lawyer. He defended all these guys in their trial with this Grillo murder and of the Dawn Grillo. So Brindisi was the lawyer for all these guys, and that'll come to play later because you've got Angelo Grillo. A few years later, he goes up and he sees this Louis Brindisi at a local bar, and he says, you represented the men who killed my wife. And Brindisi says, well, I represent all the mob guys over here. So this Grillo jumps on him, starts pounding him in the face.
Oh, really?
And as Brindisi pulls out a gun and just starts shooting at him in the middle of the parking lot.
Oh my God.
And the shooting was ruled self-defense rather than reckless endangerment. He was shooting at him in public, but yeah, I guess the law found on his side for self-defense. But that's kind of where this Brindisi, he gets tied up in everything. Really? Then after Brady and his crew go to jail, you got January of 1983, which was a terrible month in Utica. You've got 3 murders in Utica in January of '83, and they're pretty bad ones. You got this lawyer, Joseph Taquinho. He was Brindisi's partner, and he was a young attorney. I guess he worked with Brindisi. He was found murdered in his office, and there were files thrown everywhere and everything. And he was representing his client, A.J. D'Amico, who was a Colombo guy, and the police found some convoluted explanation for why he was murdered. Some guy in New York was trying to track him down about a charity he wanted to set up, and but as soon as and then he killed this lawyer because he was paranoid. But the police found that out when they went to this murderer's house, and he was dead, and they found him dead and burned to death in his car. And as soon as the police discover who this murderer is, he's burned to death in his car. What it sounds to me like is this. The Colombos were looking to see if one of their men was informing to the police. And so they're going through the lawyer's files. Now, this young lawyer shows up for work a little bit earlier, a little bit later than he was supposed to, and he walks in on them searching the office, and they did what had to be done, and they shot him. And then they tried to play it off on some crazy guy who had a scheme, and he killed the lawyer as a result. But I think that this Taquinho was killed sort of an accidental, right in the moment. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yeah, interesting. A mob lawyer like that, I've never really heard of one getting killed unless they were actually doing business with them. Doesn't sound like either one of these guys were particularly doing business with them. They knew a lot of secrets, but yeah. Usually I've never heard of that before. So that makes sense. That explanation makes sense.
And yet, within 2 days of each other, these two, this Hector Ambrosi and Carla, which it's hard to get anything except that they were both, this Hector was shot in the head. He was known for his affiliations. It's possible he was an informant. But there was a lot going on with the street tax at this time. This Carla Feliciano, she was a dancer at a local mob-run strip club. She was stabbed to death, but it's not really a mob type hit. A lot of people attribute this to the mob, but mob guys don't use. I don't know. To just go and stab a woman. That just sounds. That's just not really. That's not really out. I included it, but I don't think that sounds like their MO. No, it could just be a timing thing. A lot of people dying in January in Utica in 1980.
I guess so. It's cold up there.
Right. Snow gets deep. You got nothing else to do.
Couldn't take it any longer. Whatever it was, they couldn't take it any longer. If you say that one more time, bitch. You had that thought processes.
I'm gonna kill you and blame it on the mob. I'm in Chicago, man. Who you telling? So then you've got this Grillo gets out of prison, and he goes after this Brindisi, and then
goes after his lawyer.
Yeah, he went after the lawyer and beat him up. The lawyer shot at him. Well, then
maybe the lawyer, maybe Grillo had sent somebody to kill Brindisi back at his office, and they got him mixed up. They got the lawyers mixed up.
Maybe.
There's another theory.
That's right. So
the lawyer shoots his ex-client then.
He shot at him. He shot at him. He didn't hit him.
Oh, okay.
And the guy got away, and the lawyer was all charges were dropped. It was shooting with self-defense. But then 6 months later, this Angelo Grillo is shot to death while sitting in a bar. This is kind of like what happened to the Virginian. He's sitting at the bar, and a masked man walks in with a rifle and just blasts him off a stool. But the same night he was shot, Gary, was the night the local police chief was being married and most of the cops were at his reception, including Louis Brindisi, he was at the reception also. So, I mean, that's a hell of an alibi. You just happen to get shot on the night all the cops are at the damn reception? Come on, man.
Yeah, well, I think Mr. Grillo, people had had enough of Mr. Grillo.
Can't go punching mob attorneys.
Including the mob attorney. They'd had enough.
Can't go punching mob attorneys. Then you've got Bretti's brother. Somebody blew up a bomb on his house. I think that there was another guy, Jake Minicone, who was a rising star in the regular Utica mob. So it looks like the Colombos were all pretty much wiped out of the area by the end of this. And then between 83 and then you've got these two older guys, Anthony Falange and Angelo Conti. They were the heads of gambling and loan sharking. They were basically running the Utica crew, and they both died in 85 and 88. And then between 88 and 1990, you've got a massive indictment. All of the young guys, all the up-and-coming guys, are all sent to prison for different mob things. There was a major sweeping indictment against basically all the remaining mob guys, including Brindisi. He was listed as an uncharged co-conspirator. So that's everybody was brought down, except the only person left out of jail or left alive when everything was over was old man Joseph Falcone, who was sitting at his home.
Oh, really?
He died of old age at 90. Neither he or his brother ever spent any time in jail. So while all this combat was going on and everyone was fighting in the streets, and Joseph Falcone was sitting at home collecting his percentage and eating his dinner and drinking his Chianti.
Eating his oatmeal and drinking his Chianti, right. Or his masticholi and his Chianti.
And his
with some warm bread.
That's right.
And salad with house dressing, the Italian dressing.
That's right. So he was the first and he was the last. He died in his home at 90 of old age, never spent a day in jail. So the whole crew was wiped out in 1990, and 2 years later, old man Falcone calls it quits.
Yeah, I would imagine they're in the 80s. Probably by then, they'd gotten around to doing a RICO case on that whole little crime family after all this violence of the 70s and early 80s. That's when the FBI, you just can't keep getting those headlines of one person murdered after another. And especially when they're close together like that, well, it really puts pressure on the FBI and local police to do something, and they'll work together. And then by middle 70s, they had that RICO statute in. They're really starting to use it. It took them a while. Yeah. But by then, the later 70s, they really were starting to use it and figured out how to use those wiretaps and hidden microphones to build a case, and just get these predicate offenses on these underlings. You get any kind of a case on some of these underlings, and then you get the wiretap, and you end up picking up little tidbits of information, starting to put it together, and that's how you take out the whole family. That's why they prospered so well so long. Yeah, because they didn't have those tools. But boy, after that RICO and wiretap,
RICO with Robert Blakey just took them out.
Oh man, it did.
Yeah, you can see example sort of why that street tax that we've talked about. Looked like they were doing it everywhere. You got a guy in 1989. This guy. Butch Sandoke was he was with his daughter, and he was a bookmaker. He was shot to death for not paying the street tax there. So it just, you can see that's another example of the violence, but that's that street tax too. You saw a lot of that in Chicago, especially with the Wild Bunch a little bit earlier in the 70s with just shooting guys right in the street for not paying tax. Hal Smith and some other guys. But here you got right up in Utica, that street tax, you didn't pay it, and they just shot him right there. And it was shortly thereafter, after that kind of brazen violence, that they really wiped out the whole organization.
Well, interesting. It's been great, Cam. The story of the Utica mob, and the life and death of a crime family or a crew, basically, I guess. But this has been really interesting. I appreciate you doing all this research for me and helping me out with this. We're just going to keep on doing these over the next few months and see what happens, right?
It beats sitting alone talking to myself about it.
And you got a few thousand people out there to talk to about it.
Right.
They just can't talk back.
That's
See, that's the
right.
beauty of this. We can say something and nobody, they can talk back, but it's only later on. They can't
right.
call you on it. If you get something wrong, nobody can call you on it right now.
As wrong as I want to be.
You got a bully pulpit here.
Right.
All right. Well, this has been great. Folks, if you have a friend or relative who has a problem with drugs or alcohol, make your first call to First Call. Call 816-361-5900 or go to their website, www.firstcallkc.org. If you want to see a really good mob movie, a mob documentary, and people are telling me that's one of the better mob documentaries that they've seen, better go rent or buy Brothers Against Brothers, the Savella Spiro War. It's on Amazon or it's at my website. It has special features on it. Of course, I've got my first movie, Gangland Wire. If you want the DVD, I've got it on my website at kind of a cut rate price because I've had it for so long. It's got special features on it too, or you can rent it from Amazon. Got my book, Leaving Vegas, How FBI Wiretaps Ended Mob Domination of Las Vegas Casinos. I'm going to be on, because of that book, primarily, Cam, this Las Vegas Review Journal reporter that's putting together that podcast with the Mob Museum.
Oh, is that where he got you?
And he got onto the book and started reading the book and really using it as kind of a roadmap to really talk about that with some intelligence. And I sent him a bunch of the wiretaps and things. Folks, I've kind of launched right into that. I'm going to be a guest on a limited run podcast that's sponsored by the Mob Museum and completed by the Las Vegas Review Journal. And I don't know when that'll come out exactly. He's supposed to interview me tomorrow afternoon. I know he's already interviewed Harry Reid, who was the Clean Face, who was the head of the Gaming Commission in Las Vegas during the 70s. And of course, he's got Frank Culotta out there. He's interviewed him, Bill Owsley, and I gave him another name of a member of the Hole in the Wall gang, Ernie DeVino, who would not talk and did his time and ended up in New Jersey and
Jersey,
got himself turned around, didn't go back into crime, and now he's just growing old peacefully out there. He and I both were under contract to help another company out that's supposed to do a documentary about it, although I haven't heard anything back from them for about a year now. So you never know what's going to come up in the future. So I thank you again for helping me out, Cam, and we will talk to you later. Bye, folks.
That'd be great. Thanks.